Welcome to Watch, Review, Repeat. This is the podcast where two best friends discuss the latest in film and television and then do it all over again the following week. My name is Colton Brown, and joining me is Andrew Meadows.
You ready for part 2 of Star Wars, man?
Oh yeah. We just had so much to talk about that we decided it would be best if we did 2 separate episodes on Star Wars: The Last Jedi. So on our last episode, we touched on the news and talked at length about the movie without getting into any spoilers. And on this episode, we're going to be talking nothing but spoilers. And we're going to get right into it. So full spoilers for Star Wars: The Last Jedi. And this is really probably going to be one of the most in-depth spoiler discussions we've ever done. So if you haven't seen the movie, I would highly advise that you pause here and come back when you've seen the movie, because we are literally going to deconstruct this movie from start to finish, touch on our reactions to everything, our questions we might have, anything that we have that comes to mind as we kind of run through all the major set pieces, all the major scenes in this movie. So again, I think you're doing yourself a big disservice if you listen to this without having watched the movie. So that is my recommendation. But you do you.
You do you.
Exactly. So, Star Wars: The Last Jedi begins with an opening crawl. And basically it sets up that, on the heels of The Force Awakens, the First Order has learned the location of the Resistance's base on Dakar. And so it basically begins with the Resistance evacuating, with, the First Order kind of pressing down on them. And it opens up with this pretty massive battle sequence, actually a big space battle. And I guess technically this isn't the first time we've seen a big space battle opening a movie. Revenge of the Sith did feature something, but this is a much better version of that, I thought. And there's a lot of really cool sequences that kind of play out within this major battle.
Poe Dameron's a fucking badass, okay?
Yeah, that's where it starts, is Poe just being kind of a cocky jackass and stalling for some time with Hux, and then showing off, yeah, I'm a badass.
So, everybody, you should have seen the movie if you're listening to this, but the baddest, biggest, fucking most ridiculous Star Destroyer shows up.
The Dreadnought?
The Dreadnought, yes. And it's this massive fucking ship. It's huge. And it flies in from hyperspace. Whoomp! And it's there. And then you have Poe Dameron in his little X-Wing. Hey, listen, I have a message for Hux. And he's sitting there squaring off against this. It's easily at least 2 times, 3 times, 4 times the size of a Star Destroyer. And he flies up and he's sitting there squared up against it. Meanwhile, he's, I guess, pulling fuel, or he's charging up his boosters or something. And then he fucking flies in. He, BB-8 ignites his booster, and he just fucking shoots in there, and it's so fast that little BB-8's head flies backward, and he's glued to the back of his seat. And then he spreads the X-wings out to go into battle formation, and he starts shooting all the fucking surface lasers, and the surface lasers can't shoot him because he's too close and he's too small and all this other shit, and he's blowing the shit up the fucking Dreadnought. It's so fucking cool, man. Oh, fucking Poe Dameron.
I love that, at least in both movies that Poe's obviously appeared in, we get like a major sequence of Poe just being an absolute fucking boss in the X-Wing.
Yes.
We saw it on Takodana in The Force Awakens. You've got that really awesome, cool tracking shot of him just absolutely laying waste to some TIE fighters. And in this one, I felt like that was such a cool way to open it. And I think that I told you after we saw it, I was just like, I was really excited to see you react to this opening bit, because I know you love yourself some Oscar Isaac, but by extension, you love yourself some Poe Dameron, of course. And so to see Poe open this movie by being a fucking badass, like, that is like the perfect note to start this movie.
Oh, it's so cool.
And yeah, he does like this one maneuver where the Dreadnought finally deploys its TIE fighter garrison, and he does a super badass thing where he kind of just, I don't even know what the fuck he does. He like pumps the brakes and then like spins around him and takes the fighters out.
Yeah, so he's hauling ass. and like the G-forces inside his ship glue him to the side of his ship, and then he fucking spins around behind him and just shoots him all. Oh man, got me pumped. I actually just got so pumped just now I unplugged my headphones. I can't hear anything that's going on.
I'll give you a minute to get your shit together.
There we go. My shit's together.
Your shit's together. Okay, you heard that.
Yeah, I
Perfect.
literally spun around. I spun around like I was Poe Dameron, and I fucking threw my arms out, and I pulled my...
Punch it, BB-8!
Get you pumped up, man. It's so fucking cool.
It is. And so in the process, Poe takes out these surface cannons and basically sets up this bombing run for the resistance bombers to come in and try to take out this dreadnought. We got a chance to take out a dreadnought, this massive imposing ship.
I think Poe said it's a what did he say? A fleet destroying ship. Like the dreadnought is so big that it warrants whatever sacrifices need to be made in order to destroy it, because it's a ridiculous ship.
Yeah, so I mean, it just sets up this awesome World War II-esque bombing run on the dreadnought.
It's interesting that you brought that up. The bombers and the ships, even the bombers themselves, kind of replicate that World War II era kind of ships, where the gunners at the bottom inside that dome. Mm-hmm. And I definitely got that vibe. I don't know if you got that vibe as well, but you referenced it, so I assume you did.
Yeah, no, I think that was obviously a very deliberate way to kind of stage it. I mean, Rian Johnson has kind of talked about how that was kind of his influence in kind of crafting the scene.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so that was definitely kind of the intent to evoke that imagery for sure. But, most of the bombers end up blowing up in very sad, catastrophic ways, but one gets close enough to take its shot, and so we get this kind of a little look at Paige Tico. She's the gunner in that. She kind of has to come up into it. Her partner that's supposed to drop the bombs is dead, kind of got obviously hit by a stray laser or something like that, and so we kind of see her make this super heroic move, and is she going to do it, is she not going to do it, what's going to happen here, and she eventually gets the bombs off, and so we see the dreadnought go up in this massive explosion, but we also see Paige just kind of, we see her last moments, and it's like, the first time I saw it, it was just, I was taken in, like, oh, it's fucking so cool. But the second time I saw it, I'm like, this character has appeared in 1 minute of screen time, and I'm fucking emotionally impacted by this character's, like, willingness to sacrifice her life for the Resistance.
Yeah, it's huge.
Like, just so right from the beginning, I think that this might be the best opening sequence of any Star Wars movie ever.
Oh, yeah, no, without a doubt.
It's fucking incredible, and it's quite lengthy too. I mean, I kind of just expected it to be kind of a couple minutes, then we'd kind of move along. But I mean, it's an extended battle. I mean, it feels like almost a third act type battle sequence right at the beginning of the movie.
No, and it's leaps and bounds ahead of the last huge starfight you get in the beginning of any Star Wars movie. It's an incredible sequence.
Yeah, I mean, what a fucking cool way to start the movie. So they successfully bomb the dreadnought. The Resistance fleet at this point gets away, so they flee into hyperspace to escape the First Order, or so they think. And I guess just kind of take this back for a second. The way I have it kind of organized here per my notes, and this is kind of the way we're just kind of run it down in order, is we're just going to go set piece by set piece. Within the movie itself, obviously it's edited in a way that it jumps back and forth. So we're kind of just going to, so this will kind of jump around in some ways from, this might have happened an hour to the movie versus something that we're going to talk about later that might have happened 30 minutes into the movie. But generally speaking, we're kind of working our way from beginning to end. So the Resistance fleet is fleeing the First Order. They go through hyperspace, only to come to find out that the First Order has developed this method of tracking them through hyperspace. And so, General Hux, as he puts it, is we have them tied onto the end of a string, basically alluding to this technology, this groundbreaking technology that the First Order has either perfected. I would say perfected because
it evidently works. I mean, it's working.
It is working, but interestingly enough, this is something that I saw on Reddit. Rogue One has an Easter egg that references the Empire developing hyperspace tracking technology, which is super fascinating. So there's the scene in Rogue One where Jen's going through like the projects when she's trying to find out where like Project Stardust is for like the Death Star plans, and she literally says quote unquote hyperspace tracking as she's kind of working her way through the name of projects. So the Lucasfilm Story Group has their shit together. Let's put it that way. Like, they know that for something that's a throwaway line in the scheme of like Rogue One and anything that had come before it, to kind of look at it in retrospect, it's like, oh, this movie has been written for years now. Of course they knew what they were doing when they did that shit, but none of us really picked up on that as kind of anything that they would ever make, into actually anything meaningful in terms of the storyline. So that's fucking cool. I love that the story group is so interconnected between all the bits of the new canon that even just something throwaway like that ends up being significant in the long run. I mean, it's not essential for reviewing The Last Jedi. It doesn't matter in that regard, but
something else to pick up on every time you watch the movie. You can pick up on little shit, it's cool.
Exactly. So, the First Order catches up with them, and you kind of have this oh shit moment where the Resistance really kind of realizes, like, if we just go into hyperspace, they're just going to follow us again if they have a way to track us. So what do we do now? And, they don't quite figure that out just yet. I think they kind of try to stay out of the range of the cannons off of the dreadnoughts, and at this point Snoke's flagship, the Supremacy, arrives onto the scene as well. So they stay out of the range of the big ships, but then First Order's got plenty of resources at their disposal, so they send off some TIE fighters led off by Kylo Ren, who we see for the first time piloting anything. So I guess he's got them pilot genes in him,
and he likes to spin shit.
He tried spinning. That's a good trick. So Kylo kind of works his way up to the flagship of the Resistance, the Raddus, and has this moment where he has the capability to take out the bridge, which includes, of course, General Leia, his mother. And he hesitates in this moment. And there's just the way that it's shot, where you have this fade between Kylo's face and Leia's face a couple times. And it's just a really beautiful moment where you can see the conflict within Kylo of whether to really kind of pull the trigger. I mean, yeah, okay, so he's killed Han at this point, so for him it's about killing the past, and he's so much about I want to be be full on the dark side, but there's always this conflict within him where somewhere I guess he can't quite reconcile the difference and go full steam ahead. And so in his attempts to become one with the dark side of the Force, he basically tries to eradicate any elements of the past. So for him to kind of hesitate in this moment, I think is kind of a pretty big indication of kind of where his plot's going to start up and kind of work its way throughout this movie. But it's a really interesting thing. But then, of course, his trailing TIE fighters get their shots off and
blow up the fucking bridge.
Yeah, so Admiral Akbar, gone. Rest in peace, Admiral Akbar.
Presumably everybody was in the bridge,
Yeah, that's what they said. They said everyone in the command, everyone on the bridge is dead, except for General Leia,
who uses some sort of zombie walk from space. This didn't land well with me. This is one of the things that didn't land well.
What about the second time? Did you feel the same about it the second time?
Yeah, the way that they shot the scene and everything else. She's floating so far away from the ship. She's got ice on her skin. She's and somehow she channels the Force to pull her back to the ship. So I think it could have gone in a different direction, especially since everything that's gone on in a practical way.
Right, with Carrie Fisher passing away.
Exactly. I don't know why they didn't just take the out when they could have.
Yeah. Well, they certainly was a pretty massive misdirect, and one that kind of takes on a very different meaning in the context of Carrie passing away, where, yeah, I mean, the first time I saw it, I was just like, oh, wow, like, 15, 20 minutes into this movie? Like, that's okay. Wow, I didn't expect that. And then, I didn't expect her to have some sort of latent Force capabilities to propel her back into, the ship. So the first time I saw it, I think I kind of had the same reaction I think that you had. The second time, I was a little bit softer on it. The second time, I actually thought, for me, the execution I think is a little bit lacking, in the sense that I think that visually speaking, it's just kind of an awkward sequence for it to unfold the way it unfolds as it's shown. But I actually really, really like the idea behind it. In the terms of Leia having this latent Force ability. We've always kind of had hints at Leia being Force capable, and she's never really been given an opportunity to utilize that or train that. And obviously in the years since Return of the Jedi, that never really kind of happened either. And so I thought it was a really interesting way for, in this literal life or death situation, for kind of this unknown force to kind of literally save her life. I thought that was a really beautiful moment. For me, I think it's something that if we knew we were going to get Leia in episode 9 and we could potentially explore that further, I think that it would have a lot more resonance than it does, because now it does kind of feel, what you mean. I mean, it is, if they were going to take it out, if they were going to kind of restructure this film in any sort of way to address Carrie not being involved in episode 9, then that probably would have been the easiest and the most effective way to do it. And it would have required, obviously, reshooting a good amount of the film, but I'm really not upset that they decided to just keep with what they had, if we're being honest. There's something happens later, I think, that for me kind of makes it worthwhile that they decided to keep Leia around through the end of the movie.
I thought the execution of it was weak, though. Like I said,
no, I agree. I mean, that's probably my biggest issue I had with it, is I just think that visually it didn't look as convincing as I think it could have. I just thought I thought it was a really fascinating idea to play with, to explore this force capability that Leia has really always had, and has never really been able to kind of do anything with. So I don't know. I mean, would have been tough to see Leia die then and there.
That's true. No, I mean, it's a tough sequence.
It would have really felt like kind of an incomplete way to handle her character, and I don't know that we'll ever get a really properly complete way to handle her character, given that I think it told multiple times. I know Kathy Kennedy has talked about how episode 9 would have been Leia's movie, and that's just not a practical possibility at this point. So that's kind of where we leave it with the First Order. They recovered Leia, but they're kind of left in a pretty dire spot where they're just kind of basically fleeing the First Order. Their fuel reserves are becoming critical at this point, and so, okay, what do we do? But we'll get to that later, because one of the other big things, and we spend a lot of time here, and that's Ahch-To, where we saw Rey find Luke Skywalker at the end of The Force Awakens. And this is the site of the first Jedi Temple. It's basically where Luke has gone off to. Force Awakens, the big MacGuffin is finding the map to Luke Skywalker, which, as it's kind of been reconciled here, it's not the map to Luke Skywalker, it's the map to the first Jedi Temple, and people, as Han puts in The Force Awakens, people closest to Luke thought he went searching for the Jedi Temple. So it was a guess, and it turned out to be the right one. It's kind of the way that it is explained here.
And this is a direct continuation from The Force Awakens as well.
Yeah, I mean, a very interesting choice too, because really every other Star Wars movie to this point has had some sort of time jump, where obviously things are happening, and then this, certainly in terms of this, I mean, I think the timeline for all of Rey's training and everything that happens on Ahch-To, it's separated from kind of the timeline for the First Order and the Resistance, all that. I mean, it's probably within days of each other, and she probably doesn't spend a lot of time on the island, but she certainly spends more than a day or so on the island.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of the Dunkirk type thing, where 1 day, 1 week, one month, or 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, whatever the hell they did in that movie. Kind of like that, just not actually laid out deliberately that way. But we pick up with Rey handing over the lightsaber to Jedi Master Luke Skywalker, who just flippantly tosses it off the side of the cliff.
Get that shit out of my face.
Nacho!
Yeah, you don't give a shit about no lightsaber.
Yeah, and I think that this is probably the moment where everyone probably starts to key into the fact that this is not going to go the way you think.
Yeah.
This is where we really see the beginning of this broken version of Luke Skywalker that is such a far cry from what we saw in the original trilogy, but it's been 30 years. It's a Luke Skywalker that's vanished from the galaxy, who's left the galaxy in such a disarray that basically a new empire has arisen in his absence. There's probably a pretty good fucking reason that Luke Skywalker, of all people, would let things get to that bad shape. And this movie, I think, does a good job of getting into that why. And this is just the beginning of showing where Luke is in terms of his mindset, in terms of, what he's been doing.
And see, that's where I say that a lot of this stuff shares similar plot beats, because I think that a lot of the reasons why Luke the way he is sharing the plot beats from the original trilogy. He very much feels like the same character, even though, he is where he is. And we probably get into it a little bit later, but
I don't really follow. How does he feel like the same character?
There's in Empire, he struggled with the foresight of what was happening to his friends, right? And he's always struggled with interpreting what's going to happen. And he's taken that same struggle with Kylo, or Ben, and he struggled with it in such a way that it caused another problem, right? So he left his training with Yoda to go pursue his friends. And in this same situation, he struggled with that foresight, and he ignited his saber, and he was going to, do whatever he was going to do to Ben, but he decided not to. And so in that sense that he's still struggling with the foresight that he has, I think that he feels very much like the same character. Obviously he's jaded, and he's recognized what he's done, and he's trying to deal with it in a certain way, but the struggles that he felt within Empire Strikes Back are the same struggles that he was dealing with then. You know what I mean? And in that sense that I think that the plot beats are the same with that particular character, because the struggles are the same struggles that he was dealing with in that movie.
But then how do you reconcile that with everything that he experienced in Jedi, though?
That's where...
I think I see where you're heading in terms of it's consistent with how his character has reacted to certain things, but I think you have to consider that Luke's in a very, very different mindset, certainly at the beginning of Jedi, but also by the end of it, where, okay, I agree, I think it does feel congruous in terms of how he does react to things in Empire, but the Luke that we see by the end of the Jedi is a very, very different Luke than we see at the end of Empire.
Right, he's a Jedi at the end of Return of the Jedi, you know what I mean? But after he's set forth the notion of training a set of individuals in the way of the Jedi and everything else, and then he still continues to struggle with the things that he struggled with in Empire. He says, "I'm done with it. I'm not going to do it. It's a folly. The Jedi are a folly. I'm not going to do it." And for me to be a Jedi and the things that the Jedi represent, I don't agree with them. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's just the vibe I got. I got the vibes that he was struggling with some of the same portions. He's struggling with the same character flaws that he was struggling with in that Empire Strikes Back. It's core to his character. So, I agree with that. I just think that, in terms of character development, it's certainly a step backwards for him, in terms of, he's gone on this big emotional arc, and then he comes broken effectively, and, so I guess, he kind of resigns himself to certain responses and stuff that are characteristic of him, but I think this is still a very, very different Luke than we've ever seen. Oh yeah, absolutely. We've never seen anybody like this before, because he thought he was somewhere, and then he fell to where where he's struggling with himself, and so you're struggling with that failure, which I think it's very apparent that's a reoccurring theme within the movie is failure, and hubris, so he reached a point where he thought that he had a solid grasp on what it is he needed to do and how to do it, and then his flaws came back and pulled him back down to where he was at within this movie, and then at the end of the movie, I think that he reached that sort of peace where he recognized where he was at, and he recognized what the problems were, and he recognized the right way to do things, and I think it's a redeeming quality of the character, but at the same time, I think that it's a nuanced way of readdressing the same plot beats that were present in
Empire
Strikes Back. Exactly.
Right. I mean, kind of just getting back, and we kind of jumped around a little bit,
Yeah,
so we'll
sorry.
probably well, no, no worries. I mean, we're in spoilers at this point, so you got a point. You got to take it to its inevitable conclusion. So, we might touch on similar things that we've already kind of glanced on already, but initially, Rey shows up. Luke says, "I'm not going to train you. You made a mistake coming here." And then, he sees flashes of, Rey. She goes to the Force tree, and it kind of piques Luke's interest. Like, okay, who's this girl? How does she know what this place is? How did she find me? How has she seen this place, as she says? And so, why are you here, Rey from nowhere? So we kind of see elements of, Luke kind of being curious about Rey and, maybe kind of breaking him out of his shell in some ways. And then really kind of think sparks it is, he comes on the Falcon, the Millennium Falcon, and R2 springs to life. And as he describes in a cheap move, shows him, the old hologram of Princess Leia, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. And, it's kind of a call to action for Luke in some ways. I mean, he's still this bitter, jaded character that feels that his mistakes, have kind of imparted these lessons upon him that he needs to then impart upon Rey, this new generation of Jedi, if you will. And so really, really touching scene on the Falcon, I thought. He pulls the dice down, just kind of a little signature trademark of the cockpit of the Falcon, kind of probably in terms of this movie, probably our biggest reminder of Han and his presence and his death and the reverberations of that kind of felt beyond that. Obviously, as the lover of Leia, the father of Kylo, the parental figure for Rey, and a best friend for Luke. I mean, the implications of that I think are kind of really felt here and there in this movie in a kind of respectful way that honors his presence and really kind of, yeah, I mean, it kind of gets you emotional about whole Han.
Yeah, does a really good job of delivering nuanced things. That's where, when Luke sees R2 for the first time and he plays that message for him, it's a callback to the character that Luke once was.
Right. And you really do see Luke kind of slip back into that character. R2, he's got kind of that same intonation that, he had on Tatooine. And you kind of, it's the scene for me that for me is the kind of the mark of Mark Hamill just being absolutely incredible in this movie, is that ability to kind of switch on a dime between being this broken version of Luke and just kind of occasionally slipping back into
he's the embodiment of the
version
character.
of Luke.
He really is Luke Skywalker, and it's amazing. Yeah. And that's where if you're invested in the series at all, seeing that sort of devotion to her character is amazing, because there are little, just tidbits of an authentic character shining through, and it's amazing.
Yeah. So Luke decides, okay, I'll teach you, Rey, and I'll show you why it's time for the Jedi to end. I'll give you 3 lessons, of which he only tells her 2, but there's a third one there somewhere, I'm sure. But, the first lesson that he gives to Rey, and this is kind of the one that, she kind of, she reaches out to the Force, life, death, peace, violence. She feels the Force around her and within her. And Luke's ultimate point is that, the Force does not belong to you. It doesn't belong to the Jedi. And I thought that this was a super fucking awesome sequence
Absolutely.
of her training. And it's obviously shades of Yoda training Luke in Empire on Dagobah, but it's, it's kind of, it's coming from a different place. And I thought that it was a good way to kind of explain where Luke's characterization is feels, but I think he's right and kind of saying that the Force is with everyone, and that's kind of a central theme of this movie, is that the Force doesn't belong to just one person. It's not a Skywalker thing. It's not about legacy in that regard. It's about balance within the universe, and so it kind of dives into that in different aspects, and this I think is kind of the first way that it really touches on in a big heavy-handed kind of way, by obviously directly addressing it. And
it's probably got the most humorous part of the whole movie in that one sequence. He's tickling her with that weed,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a critical point especially with Luke's character, that we can exist in such a way to where good and bad are all kind of relative. You know what I mean? It's it's all balance, and it's a really powerful moment.
Yeah, and another powerful moment that kind of follows up on the heels of that is the second lesson that Luke gives her, that, you know, the legacy of the Jedi Order has been failure. You know, you mentioned that failure is obviously very heavily present throughout this movie, and it's a big way of kind of how Rian Johnson exposes these characters to some of the hardest circumstances that they go through, and how they deal with that is kind of the big takeaway. But, you know, he mentions that, and I really enjoyed this kind of callback of saying that it was the Jedi Order and their ignorance and their blindness, they allowed, you know,
pride,
Palpatine to become, they allowed Palpatine to become Darth Sidious, to eventually become Emperor Palpatine, to form the Galactic Empire that effectively enslaved the galaxy for decades, and until, you know, obviously the events of the original trilogy unfolded as the way we saw them. I mean, I think that's obviously kind of what Lucas was trying to tell in the prequel trilogies. He just didn't quite know how to tell it. But to kind of see it, you know, laid bare in this, I think it, you know, it does. I enjoy it because it ties everything together in a nice way, where it's a good way of, again, it fits well with Luke's character, but it also is completely congruous with the saga as we've seen it to this point, and it feels like a good callback and a strong callback that's both, you know, referential, but also, you know, it feels relevant as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those things where Poe Dameron's, you know, facing the same challenges as everyone else. You know, he's facing the hubris. You know, I can react in such a way I can make a difference. I can destroy the ship, but at what cost? You know, and at what point does your pride start to impact the people around you? And it's really a profound take on everything, you know. And like you said, the development of Palpatine under the Jedi. Under the Jedi, the Emperor Palpatine was able to usurp the power of the entire universe. You know, it's really powerful shit.
Oh, I say, I mean, I think it's a really strong way of taking what's already happened and applying it to the current situation, and so I really liked the continuity that they kind of explored in just that brief moment. But you know, kind of moving beyond that, what we see through a lot of Rey's time on Ahch-To is somehow there's this connection that gets bridged between her and Kylo Ren, and so they have these series of conversations with each other. And it's fascinating because obviously Rey, to this point, you know, her experience with Kylo is in encountering him on Takodana, where he takes her prisoner, tries to infiltrate her mind to find Luke, and then beyond that, she sees him as this monster that kills Han Solo on Starkiller. They have this kind of standoff. Yeah, so that's really kind of all she knows of him, and, you know, she knows that, you know, he killed his father. And she's just trying to kind of understand where, like, who is Ben Solo, like, who is Kylo Ren, like, how is this, how it came to be. And for them to kind of have these series of conversations where they can't really have any sort of physical contact, so it's not going to come down to a lightsaber battle. It's conversations that these people have, and they're kind of forced to have it. No pun intended. But it's a really, really interesting set of sequences between these two characters. And, of course, it's brilliantly portrayed by Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley, who chemistry is off the charts here. And I don't mean in terms of kind of, you know, shipping possibilities or anything like that, but these two actors just play off each other extremely, extremely well. And I think that's what makes these sequences of characters literally in separate frames talking to each other really compelling to watch.
It does a really good job of humanizing Kylo Ren as well. I don't think that's something we got a lot of in Force Awakens. I mean, we got a little bit of it, but we didn't thoroughly understand the character. And I think that Last Jedi did a good job of humanizing him and making him relatable.
Well, I mean, we certainly see the conflict within him highlighted. And Rey obviously kind of points to that as the one thing that she kind of latches onto is, you know, it's, you know, you're not all bad. I sense the conflict within you. I sense the good in you. Even Snoke at one point kind of points out, you know, there's too much of your father in you, obviously in reference to Han Solo, but even there's too much of his grandfather in him in some ways. and the way that, Vader redeemed himself because Luke was able to bring him back to the Anakin Skywalker that we once knew. And he's certainly the most conflicted villain we've ever seen in Star Wars before. He's not good, but he's not necessarily outright bad. He wants to be. That's kind of the path that has led him to this point. He felt betrayed. He's been manipulated, so this is kind of where he's at, but he's still not quite there in terms of kind of where he kind of settles in on how he feels. And so these conversations between him and Rey really just kind of highlight that. And, for Kylo in this situation, he senses that, he knows Rey is obviously very raw and powerful in the Force, and he senses her, abilities to be, she could obviously be a great ally to him. And, he's not so much about, the dark side's the best thing in the world. It's just that, hey, we have an opportunity here to understand each other and to possibly, make a difference together, to change what's come before and to forge your own paths together. And to pair these characters together like that, I thought was just a really good way of highlighting the characterizations for both. And so I thought that these sequences were really, really fucking compelling. And it kind of leads into this sequence and a very, very visually arresting kind of sequence where Rey travels to this cavern beneath Ahch-To, where, she senses the darkness. And she's attracted to that for some reason. I think she's seeking answers, possibly principally, I'd say, about kind of where she came from, who her parents are, what's her place in all this. And so she kind of seeks answers in this place. And so we kind of get this sequence. And this is certainly something I think is very evocative of Luke in the dark side cave at Dagobah, in terms of Rey kind of having some sort of experience with the Force and trying to get answers, and they're not really exactly laid very obviously out for her. I'm curious to see what you thought about this sequence.
I gathered that she was trying to seek answers to questions that didn't necessarily need answers. I think that what they call it is a Force nexus, I think, and that's where a lot of Force powers are like all in one place. And it called to her, and much in the same aspect where Luke went into the cave and he saw what he needed to see. I think she saw what she needed to see, where she was looking for answers in all the wrong places. She was looking for her parents, and she was looking for guidance and how she needed to fit within the universe that she was in. And she got the answers that she needed. She needs to stand on her own 2 feet and figure out who she is by herself. She has her own power that she can draw within. It doesn't matter where she came from or how she got there. What matters is she's there, and she needs to make a decision on who she wants to be. And then that's pretty much what I got from that.
Yeah, no, that's kind of how I interpret it as well. Is you see the two shadows kind of walking towards her, and then they merge into one, and then she sees herself. And so the way I kind of took out of it is that it's not about where you came from, it's about who you are and who you can be. I think that's kind of what it was telling to me, is that, this is about you. It's not about what came before you or, what's to come. This is the here and the now, and it's about you. And it's an interesting sequence. Certainly, like I said, the snapping of the fingers, it's a really cool visual, really cool sound design and everything, the way that you kind of see that.
And it's almost like you'll notice that it takes so you have the camera centered on Rey in the middle, right? But then certain times it'll flip to what's ahead of her and what's behind of her.
Right, yeah.
So with the snapping, it'll show her snap, and it's centered on her, and then it'll continue down the row, and then what's before her will snap, and what's ahead of her will snap, and I really get really excited when you have visual storytelling like that, where it's not only, hey, listen, this is what we're trying to tell you, but we're going to show you through visuals and sound and everything else to what we want to convey to you. And I thought within that sequence, it did a really good job of conveying that message through visual storytelling, and that was a strong point within Rey's story arc.
Plus, it lets her put her hair down, so that's obviously very, very big in that regard. We get a little bit of a shake up in Rey's design. She's letting go of her little 3-bun action that we saw little Rey had. So she's been doing the same hairstyle since her parents abandoned her, and now it's time to turn a new leaf and change the hair up.
Absolutely,
very important. But so basically, kind of out of her experiences down there, she kind of comes back to Kylo. They have their Force time. They have this moment where they join hands, and then Luke kind of barges.
Is that where Kylo doesn't have a shirt on?
No, that's a little bit earlier, but I think this is where I think they're both sitting, and then we kind of see them joining, and then Luke kind of comes in, and we know with the way that they show it within the movie itself, you see kind of Luke looking at him, and you see Kylo actually physically present on Ahch-To for that brief moment, and Luke's just, nah, fuck this, blows the roof off and says, this can't happen. This is, don't do this. And so Rey kind of has this confrontation with Luke very briefly in regard to kind of the versions of the destruction of the Jedi Order at the hands of Kylo. So I think you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. And, Luke gave his version where, he sensed the darkness and Kylo turned against him. And then Kylo gave his version where Luke tried to kill him in his sleep. And so he rebelled against that and out of necessity. And so, at long last, Rey confronts Luke about it, and Luke kind of gives the true version of it, which I think you kind of briefly mentioned, which is Luke did confront him, did have this brief instinct of, I've seen this destruction in his mind. I've seen the corruption by Snoke. I can snuff this out right now and prevent this from ever happening. And so for the briefest moment, he ignites the green saber and has this moment where he's basically succumbs to his darkest senses, and then it goes away just as soon as it came. But there's consequence that comes with that. Yeah. Ben is awake, he sees it happening, he interprets it as this is his uncle standing over him with his lightsaber ignited. I mean, it's hard to interpret that in any other way. And so he force pulls his lightsaber and strikes back, and basically, as Luke puts it, with a handful of other Jedi, he ransacks the Jedi temple, leaves Luke for dead, and kind of goes off. And so, I mean, it's that moment. It's not the destruction of the Jedi Order at that point. It's Luke's failure with Ben. His briefest moment of just succumbing to those urges, and that's what fundamentally just breaks Luke and leads him to kind of say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. This isn't right. I have to leave. I have to exile myself. And it's heartbreaking. We saw flashes of the destruction of the temple. We see him, place his little robot hand on R2's little Astrodome head and the Force Awakens, and that little force back that we got with Rey when she touches the saber. And so we saw flashes of this instance, but we never quite got a full explanation of why that happened. Han mentions that, a pupil of his turned against him, which was obviously Kylo. But to kind of see it depicted here, I mean, it was really emotionally affecting. And, I didn't know if we would kind of get a full explanation on what happened here, but I thought that this was a really good explanation for both Kylo's characterization and explaining why Luke has acted the way that he has done.
Well, yeah, he almost killed his nephew. He's struggling with it.
I mean, and Luke is such a good-natured character that for me it does seem perfectly in line with his characterization, that for him to kind of have this moment that has this far-reaching consequence for that to really kind of shatter his soul, I think that really kind of makes sense. And I can understand that people would be upset by this kind of decision that his character makes, but I think it's in line with everything that's come before, and I think that his response is in line with everything as well. So
yeah, and like I was saying before, he struggled with interpreting what's going on, and he acts on fleeting instinct to deal with it.
Right.
He up and left Yoda whenever he sensed that there were problems with his friends, and he thought that he was thoroughly convinced something bad was going to happen. So he left and went to Cloud City to deal with that.
Right.
He sensed that Kylo Ren was having, that he was a dark individual and that his mind was made up, and he ignited his saber and he thought that he would just immediately take care of it, but then he turned off his, I guess he never really had an opportunity to turn off his saber, but immediately had to deal with the consequences of him thinking the way he was thinking. So I think, like you said, I think it's perfectly in line with his character that he reacted the way he did, and he's dealing with the consequences in the way that he is. I think it's all perfectly in line. It just tells a very heart-wrenching story of the character, and it makes for a jaded character, and I think it makes for a compelling character at the same time.
Yeah, and so we see kind of Rey, once the truth has been revealed to her, she offers him the saber one more time, like it's now or never, and Luke refuses the call. And so Rey kind of, after she's had these conversations with Kylo, she says, well, he's our last hope now. And so Rey, goes with the Falcon and heads off to meet up with Kylo. And that's kind of the ending of really Rey's training on Ahch-To, and really kind of, I guess it's the last interaction that she has with Luke, right?
Much in the same way that Luke left Yoda.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of parallels between her character. They're for different reasons. She was hoping that she could change Kylo, whereas Luke left to go save his friend. So, I mean, it's there's differences, but at the same time, there's parallels between the two characters. And I think that's where some of the plot beats resonate as being very similar.
Yeah, well, speaking of Master Yoda, he makes a little cameo appearance in this, doesn't he?
And I think that's probably the heaviest hitting comedy. I
think.
Yeah,
well, I mean, because this is Empire Strikes Back Yoda. This is a Yoda that's been in exile that intentionally kind of fucks with Luke to kind of get a rise out of him, just to kind of test him in some ways. And we get the puppet back here, and let me be the first to say that fuck CGI Yoda. It's all about Puppet Yoda. Puppet Yoda is superior, except in Episode 1 where it was a terrible Puppet Yoda, and I don't know what the hell happened there, but OG original trilogy Puppet Yoda, yeah, like that's Yoda. That's Yoda. You're sick, Yoda. Fucking this Yoda is amazing, and it's heavy hitting in the way that Yoda's here to drop some wisdom, and he does it in such a magnificent way. And this is a thing that I think that could have probably been, I think this, bringing Yoda into the fold could have gone sideways at this point. It could have gone too far in the direction of trying to replicate what came before it. But I think it did it in a way that, of course, Master Yoda's there to humble Luke into showing him his failings and showing him that, okay, so you failed. So what? Like that's how you learn. And so... this is, if I had to say, it's probably one of my favorite sequences in this movie, and it's one that really caught me off guard. I mean, they obviously kept Yoda's involvement as a pretty big secret coming into this movie, and I think that was the right call, because for me, just the everything about it, the puppet, and just the lessons that he gives to Luke, and the dialogue is just so well written here. I thought that it absolutely felt like a perfect extension of the Yoda that we see. It didn't feel like someone trying to copy. It just felt like, yeah, Yoda's back. I mean, of course it's Yoda. I mean, he's always going to be there to guide Force users and stuff like that, and so it felt like such a perfect way to bring him back.
And it felt like an extension of Luke's character as well. It's the job of learning is not done.
Yeah, and I enjoyed that he was a cheeky little bastard in this too. Wisdom they held, but that library contained nothing that the girl Rey does not already possess. She took the fucking books out of the tree. She put them on the Falcon. You little bastard. Yeah, it's awesome that that was in reference to the Jedi text, I guess, for context. I like that Yoda is consistently just trolling Luke. Luke tries to get into the tree, and then Yoda kind of, he summons lightning, and kind of forces him out of there. And he doesn't obviously spell it out, but Rey has the access.
I still
to the
think
knowledge.
That's an awesome line. Yeah, Luke's all pissed and he's all jaded. I'm gonna burn it down, Yoda. I'm gonna go burn down the tree in the library. And he's sitting there looking at it like he's gonna burn it up, and then Yoda summons the lightning down, blows it up.
Yeah, and he just starts laughing.
He's kicking his feet and laughing. Yeah, it's great.
Oh, it's so good. But then, really by the end of that sequence, we are what they grow beyond. that is the burden of true masters.
So profound, man. What the fuck?
What a fucking line. Like, for me, that is, oof. That's the moment where I'm just like,
goddamn Yoda.
This
that wisdom, though.
Yeah. Just that line is just, it's profound, as you said, and just a perfect encapsulation of really kind of certainly Luke's journey in this movie, in terms of really kind of what he's been through and how it applies to Rey and Kylo, and fuck, man, it's just so good, man. But it really is
Star Wars.
It's fucking Star Wars, man. That is the most fucking Star Wars quote right there. And I think it's one that will stand the test of time with, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
It's really good. But shifting over to kind of one of the major subplots, Finn and Rose, who's a maintenance worker for the Resistance, they kind of, they meet up through unfortunate circumstances, but they kind of come to this realization that, hey, we can figure out how to stop the First Order from tracking us through hyperspace. So they hatch up this convoluted plan to get on board the lead Star Destroyer for the First Order to disable the tracking. They get Poe involved in it, and, all right, we got to get away off this ship. We got to make our way to this Master Codebreaker, who, courtesy of Maz Kanata in a brief appearance, says that, yeah, he'll get you on board the Star Destroyer, no problem.
Which is pretty funny, though. She has it looked like maybe a sexual...
a little sexual rendezvous with the Master Codebreaker. certainly seemed to imply that, yes.
I laughed my ass off both times when I saw that. That was hilarious. Anyways.
So they make their way over to Canto Bight, which is kind of this planet that is host to a very large casino-type setting. It seems like most Star Wars planets are like, there's one thing on this planet. So I don't think it's a casino planet per se. I think it's just a planet that has a big casino on it. I could be wrong. It could just be a planet full of entirely just casinos in the way that Coruscant is just one big fucking city.
Right.
But, they make their way to this setting. We kind of get a little cantina-esque type thing in terms of seeing a lot of aliens and creatures and critters and stuff like that and within the casino. But... they look around. They're trying to find this Master Codebreaker. They eventually find him, only to be kind of swept away to jail because they illegally parked on the beach. Or basically, is kind of what it was.
See, and I got a Cloud City vibe from this place.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the character that they go to meet, and then the portrayal of that character.
Well, in some ways, yeah, it's a little Lando-esque, yeah.
So I think there's. It's different enough to feel completely different, but at the same time, the subtleties of those same plot beats are present.
Yeah. I guess I kind of see where you're heading with this. I mean, you can draw the comparisons. It's not. I guess kind of what you've been saying all along.
It's not directly like the trench runs and everything else, but it's similar enough for me to draw that sort of parallel. And so, yeah, in some ways. I mean, it's a loose connection, but it's enough that I see where you're coming from. Yeah. But they meet up with DJ, portrayed by Benicio del Toro. Who fucking nails it. I thought that was great.
He nails it, is what you would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, he's this slicer character who... he kind of overhears them talking about, okay, we're captured. How do we get onto the Star Destroyer now? So he, they initially don't really see eye to eye, but he helps them escape. They kind of escape. There's kind of this big escape sequence on the Fathiers, who are these kind of basically space horse type things that have been kind of enslaved and are whipped and stuff like that. So little shades of animal cruelty gets thrown in there. And, so they kind of run through this setting and kind of trash this casino setting that we just saw. And beyond that, it's kind of relevant later, I think, that this particular set piece and kind of where it's structured, the Fathiers, the Space Forces, there's like these little slave kids who are, involved in I guess, overseeing them or anything like that. It's just like little kids just kind of living in like barns and shit.
little Anakins.
Yeah, a bunch of little Annies. Yeah, that's a good tie-in. But Finn and Rose kind of have this brief interaction with them where they kind of, give them a little inspiration and give them like, hey, it's not all slavery and shit because of the First Order. Like there is the resistance. The resistance is out there. I mean, they're very small and they're getting smaller by the minute, but they're out there. So that kind of pays off in a big way towards the end, which we'll get to. But eventually, BB-8 and DJ have a little team up action. They snag a little starship and rescue Finn and Rose and bring them off Canto Bight and kind of bring them heading towards the Supremacy, which is the lead Star Destroyer, so they can work on deactivating that hyperspace tech. In the process, it kind of touches on aspects of capitalism. DJ's kind of, everyone's like, everyone in this casino is rich because, they're all involved in selling ships to the First Order because war is the most profitable business. And, it's kind of like, okay, well, yeah, they're selling ships to the First Order, but, it looks like they just sold some X-Wings to the Resistance. Huh, that's interesting. What do you think about that? And so you get kind of little bits and pieces, they touched on the animal cruelty and now they touch on kind of the perils of capitalism and stuff like that. And I thought it was kind of interesting that they kind of decided to pull in some
modern problems.
Yeah, some modern parallels to kind of lend some credence, I guess, to kind of what they're going with it. I mean, I don't know that it's explored in any sort of meaningful detail per se, but it is kind of interesting to at least kind of touch on those aspects. And for me, this whole Canto Bight thing, I actually really like the setting. I just think that the actual sequence of it in the scheme of things, it's just the weakest subplot. And I find when they're kind of bouncing back between Octo and the First Order fleeing, or I'm sorry, the Resistance fleeing from the First Order, I just found that more interesting and more pressing. This one kind of just felt like, for as much as they're trying to be, like their whole mission is we need to get on the Star Destroyer ASAP so we can get the hyperspace. It just kind of seemed a little meandering in terms of how they handle the pacing of it.
Right.
But it's a fun sequence and it's a cool setting, and so I enjoyed it from that respect. And it does really set up something towards the end, which I think the first time through I didn't. It was like, okay. The second time through and third time through, I was just like, I see why this whole sequence was included. I think it's worth it because of this, but later. So now we're kind of getting to the shit really going down. So eventually Rey, she takes one of the pods from the Falcon, ejects, and she boards the Supremacy.
Which is really fucking cool, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the whole sequence was really cool.
Yeah, so she boards the Supremacy. She's met by Kylo Ren, and Rey and Kylo kind of meet Snoke in the throne room, and Snoke kind of toys with Rey a little bit, and Kylo, you finally delivered. You've brought me the girl that I've been saying you need to bring to me since The Force Awakens, and we get this kind of brief snippet of. Snoke toying with Rey, and then he's like, all right, Kylo, finish her. She's a threat. She needs to be killed. And we get this awesome sequence where Kylo
cuts that motherfucker in half, dude.
Yeah, well, all right, yeah, cut right to the chase. Yeah, say he doesn't quite show his cards, even though Snoke think that he knows his every move.
It's hubris, dude. It's pride.
Yeah, Kylo steps up in a big bad way and says, it's time for the old to die. Cuts Snoke in half. His hand's just sitting on the throne there too. It's pretty gruesome, actually.
There's a lot of gruesome shit that happens in that throne room.
Yes, there is. So Snoke gets cut in half, and he's got these Praetorian guards kind of flanking him on either side of him, and they're not pleased with Snoke getting cut in half, and so we get this fucking amazing melee between Kylo and Rey teaming up against these Praetorian guards who are, kind of visually reminiscent of the royal guards from the original trilogy, except these guys actually do something aside for stand around. And this is fucking mind-blowing, this sequence here. It starts with just kind of Kylo kind of force pulling the lightsaber through Snoke to cut him in half into Rey's hand. She catches it and transitions into this amazing slow-mo sequence of the guards kind of soaring him on either side and then just kind of working together. And this whole sequence, I can't put into words how impactful it is. But the first time I saw it, I was just in stunned silence. The second, third time I saw it, it was tears of joy because it's just so incredible to witness.
It's cool, man. It's I'm really happy that they did the force whips
Yeah.
The lightsaber whips, they're fucking cool, and they get that one guy that like he throws his thing around that lightsaber and then like inches her closer, It was really, it's just so fucking cool. A lot of cool shit going on in that scene.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, it's just one of the best combat sequences we've seen in the whole saga, honestly. And it's not your traditional lightsaber duel or anything like that. I mean, it's a team up fight versus opponents that they work through them fairly quickly, but certainly they stand their ground. I mean, they definitely feel like they earned their place there, but they ran up against the buzzsaw, so tough break. But
that one dude falls inside that hole.
Yeah, he gets shredded.
Yeah, it gets. I mean, just shit flies everywhere.
And I'll say, the fucking Rey tossing the saber to Kylo, just the brief ignition through the face. Holy shit!
Oh, yeah.
Like,
it's ridiculous.
Just everything in that sequence. I think there's a couple beheadings at least. It is brutal. It's amazing though. It's just like, this is everything I wanted in my life, and I want more of it.
Right.
But really cool, and the team up between Kylo and Rey is fleeting. Kylo senses this as his opportunity to kind of step up and really kind of ascend to
finish what Vader started.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, for someone that is so conflicted, for him to really kind of be to actually do what Vader failed to do, I guess he did take out the Emperor, but it was coming from a very different place. This is about Kylo usurping power for himself, and he tries to convince Rey to join him, say that it's not about the First Order's supremacy, it's about fuck the old, like we can do this together, we can bring a new order, and Rey's too good. She kind of sees through it and doesn't buy into it, doesn't go for it, even though Kylo has perfected his negging, and he's like, "You're nothing. Say it. Say what your parents were."
What an asshole.
Yeah, no. But you mean something to me. But it's a really, really good sequence between those two, and so they kind of struggle over Anakin's lightsaber, and they end up literally breaking it in half. So this whole sequence for me is just absolutely incredible. Cool. But meanwhile, aboard the Supremacy, Finn and Rose have made their way, courtesy of the help from DJ and BB-8. So they make it on board. They're working their way to disabling that hyperspace tracker when BB-9E has a different plan for them. Old BB-8 kind of senses them from afar and kind of snuffs out their plans. So, just when it seems like they're on the verge of completing this mad plan to, disable the hyperspace tracking so they can let the Resistance speed off into hyperspace without being tracked, they get caught. And who else to make her grand appearance other than Captain Phasma?
Captain Phasma. Do.
Is that her theme?
Yeah,
did you make a theme for it?
Yeah, I made it.
Okay.
Captain Phasma. Do.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's very fitting. So yeah, they kind of get captured. They're set up for execution. DJ basically cuts a deal, and he'd kind of been privy to some of the details of the Resistance's plans to this point, so he kind of sells them out so that he can go about his merry business. And so we leave in a pretty shitty spot for these folks. So I mean, he said, when we leave Rey and Kylo, they got the split lightsaber. When we leave in Finn and Rose, they're literally about to be executed. And as this is going on, Poe has started a mutiny aboard the Resistance's flagship. Basically, it seems like Vice Admiral Holdo, who is kind of the new leader of the Resistance, while Leia has been incapacitated after her little force adventure in space. Essentially seems like she's not doing anything as far as Poe can discern. So Poe says, all right, let's do this on our own. And so he kind of briefly takes over, but eventually Leia comes to, says, Poe, hey, maybe chill out, bro. Stuns him. And So we kind of see what the Resistance's plan here is. There's an uncharted base nearby on the planet Crate, and so they're cloaking their small transports to abandoned ship and head down there with hope that the First Order won't catch on to what they've done. They won't see them escaping there, so they'll just follow the one, flagship, and so that'll allow them to at least kind of let the First Order pass by, and then their allies can come and kind of help them out and such. So that's more or less where it goes to. But then, because of Poe's plan, because he's been in active communication with Finn and Rose, DJ has become privy to that information, and that's what he uses to kind of barter his way to freedom. So the First Order now has the full scope of the Resistance's plans and starts taking out the transports, and Vice Admiral Holdo says, not on my watch. And probably, again, one of the most amazing sequences in this, certainly in terms of cinematography and certainly in terms of sound design. She turns the Raddus around and sets it for hyperspace, heading straight for the First Order's fleet.
Kamikaze, dude.
The Lightspeed motherfucking kamikaze. She basically takes out the First Order's fleet in one foul swoop. She sacrifices her life to kind of allow the Resistance a chance to escape onto Crate by, sabotaging the First Order's fleet in this massive way. And I mean, in some ways it does seem like shit. Maybe someone should have done that in like the generations that have unfolded prior to this in Star Wars, where they had starfighters and stuff like that. But
right,
it's such a fucking cool moment that I'm not going to let that like bother me or anything like that. Like it's just such an amazing sequence.
And like I said, I think it happened in Rebels or Clone Wars or one of them. I thought it happened in one of them.
Yeah, I think when you mentioned that to me, we saw Admiral Raddus, who the Raddus is named for over in Rogue One. He uses the Corvette hammerheads to basically take the dead in the air, a Star Destroyer, and propel it towards another Star Destroyer.
Oh, there's a little Easter egg I never caught on. It's interesting you said that. I had no idea.
Yep, that's what they're. Yep, exactly. Say they. Little bits of continuity there that are fun. But so that happens. It allows Finn and Rose to temporarily escape their execution. Finn has a little, very brief confrontation with Captain Phasma, which he technically gets bested in, but with a little stroke of luck, he kind of comes back on her and sideswipes her, and she falls into a pit of fire. We'll see if she returns it. I mean, this isn't the second time that she's been around since she was seemingly kind of killed off screen, which, we didn't see a body. I mean, we see her fall into the fire. We don't know where she fell, so I wouldn't be surprised to see her in Episode 9 just, like, super pissed and, like, her whole face is just burnt or some shit. I think that would be kind of interesting if they kind of wanted to do that, but at the same time, if they chose not to do that, wouldn't upset me either. I mean, she's Boba Fett 2.0. That's all she is, really. Cool design, kind of useless. But Finn and Rose find a shuttle and make their way down to Crate, where the Resistance has already landed. They kind of barricade themselves in this mine that it's an old rebel base, so it's got some turrets and stuff and set up, and kind of this big massive wall that they can kind of at least temporarily shield themselves from the First Order once they eventually make their way down there. So the First Order does exactly that. They do make their way down there, and then the Resistance says, hey, there's these little shitty speeders, let's use that and try to charge the First Order, who's got little, they're not AT-ATs, but they're like smaller versions of them. I forget. I don't remember what they're called. They're probably something different because it's First Order delineation. But they take these little speeders, go against it. They've got this cannon that can break through the shield wall. So they try to mount this big rally against them to kind of to defeat the First Order on the surface of Crate.
And all of this feels very much reminiscent of the beginning of Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, it's Hoth-esque, yeah. Of course, its placement in the storyline is obviously very different in terms of this is the third act versus the first act there.
But even like the visualization of the salt, with the white floor, you know what I mean, the white ground and everything else in the trenches, it's very much a callback to Empire.
Yeah, it is, and then it kind of gets subverted, I think, as it goes along, though. Certainly diverges in a pretty heavy way. The Millennium Falcon makes their appearance at this point. Rey's taken on the gunner position. Chewie's piloting it with some help from some porgs. I mean, not really. They mostly just seem like they're annoying him, but yeah, the Falcon kind of distracts them to allow for this speeder charge, but ultimately it's too little too late, basically, is kind of what it boils down to. Finn kind of rears himself for a suicide run to try to break the canon, but his run is stopped prematurely by Rose, who kind of saying like it's not about fighting them, it's about saving what we love, and
he gets a little smooch.
It gets a little smooch. He seems a little taken aback by it, but I think there's a connection between those two characters. I think in the moment he's just like, "Fuck, I almost died. I'm not ready for this.
I'll take a little smooch.
Not ready for this lady to put the moves on me right now." But yeah, I mean, he likes her enough that he drags her like 4 miles back to the fucking base. So
Poe Dameron gets a little handshake action. I guess.
Hey, we're not there yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Little smolder action later on. I agree, though. Yeah,
there's a lot of feelings going on after this.
There's little feelings going on, but yeah. So the Resistance puts out their call for the Allies to come help them and save them in Crate, and no one comes. And they kind of seemed resigned to their defeat. We did what we could. What are we going to do now? And who would arrive but Master Luke Skywalker, who has a freshly shaved beard. He dyed his hair a little bit.
Yeah.
He's looking good, isn't he?
He is looking good. These are all things that I noticed after the fact.
Yeah. He's looking real good, and he walks out and basically challenges the First Order, and Kylo Ren is obviously present. They've got a little bit of a history, and basically Luke, as it turns out, is kind of serving as a distraction of sorts for the Resistance to kind of mount some sort of escape. But it leads to this confrontation between, uncle and nephew. And, Kylo comes down to the surface to have this duel with Luke. And Luke's not about that shit, he's kind of just toying with them. He's dodging his blows. He's stepping around and not creating any footprints magically. He's using a blue saber that was destroyed scenes ago, and it's just kind of a weird feeling. It's just like something's not quite right here. What's going on here? Luke is the biggest fucking badass in the world. He is literally projecting himself across the fucking galaxy. I mean, this is the best trolling attempt ever. He's literally just toying with Kylo just to kind of, distract them to allow the Resistance a moment to catch their breath and get the fuck out of Dodge. And this sequence itself, there's so many obvious hints in the moment where you're just kind of like, for me, I immediately picked, as soon as he ignited the saber and it was blue, and I was like, isn't that Anakin's hilt? Like, what? I don't understand what's going on here. Like I just felt, I knew something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it of what was going on in that moment. And part of that obviously is we really haven't seen anyone kind of pull off this, manipulation of the Force the way that Luke has done. So there's no real precedent for, oh, he's obviously doing this, anything like that.
Right.
It's not your typical Jedi mind trick that you've seen or anything like that. But in retrospect, it is very, it seems very obvious that he's kind of taken on the visual representation of when he betrayed Kylo. It's kind of what it really looks like. So that's kind of what cuts deepest for when Kylo can see him up close. He's got that saber. He's not leaving any footprints. He's not actually making any physical contact with Kylo. And then when Kylo does his kind of big sweeping motion to cut him in half, I in the moment I expected him to go full Obi-Wan and just kind of
cut right through him,
become one with the Force at this point, cut him with him, the robe to collapse and stuff like that. Come to find out, oh no, he's just not that there at all, and he stabs through him, and then there's the fucking amazing reveal of Luke just floating above the rock that Rey was training on earlier, just meditating. Like what? My audience clapped the first 2 times I saw it, and that was a moment where I'm like, you son of a bitch, you got me. You got me good. You got me good. I was like, I thought he was gone there. I thought he was going to die. And then, of course, he does become one with the Force, as it turns out, only moments later. This moment for me of Luke, the first time I saw it, it was going from one emotional high to a very emotional low of yeah, he's still alive. Oh no, he's not. Oh no, Luke's dead. There's that moment where there's just a super deflating feeling of oh my God, Luke Skywalker is gone. It's hard to process that, for someone that you've been so attached. Yeah, he's so different in this, but it's still just fuck, Luke Skywalker is gone. But the second time I saw it, it was such an amazing sequence for me because it is such an absolute perfection it's such an absolute perfect way to really kind of cap his arc and to allow him to ascend, to become one with the Force. And the way that, they seize the twin suns, and then they do the binary sunset Force theme reprise.
So cool.
It's such a touching moment. And, it's something that for Luke to basically, he knew before he did anything, before he projected himself, like this is the last thing that he'll do as a living being. Obviously he'll probably still be involved Force Ghost style beyond this, but this is the legend of Luke Skywalker. This is him embracing that and reinforcing that and trying to live up to that, and to kind of break what he's been doing for so long on Ahch-To. He's been trying to separate himself. He's closed himself off from the Force. Like, this is him
creating a new hope for others.
A new hope. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It really encompasses everything that the original two movies set out to do, and I thought it was a very touching way to summarize that character's arc. It's really well made.
Agreed. And I kind of glossed over it, but there's this really sweet scene between Luke and Leia, kind of before he goes out to meet Kylo. And for me, to kind of tie back to what I was talking about earlier, you could have written Leia out of the movie. Absolutely, there's points where you could have done it. I think that losing this scene would be really tough, and having them have one movie where both Luke and Leia die, I don't know. That's tough. I think that's tough, and I think it would be unfair to restructure the movie in a way that Leia dies earlier because of practical circumstances, and then do you kill them both? Is that too much? Okay, then do you change Luke's arc? And I wouldn't have liked that. I think that they handled Luke so well by the resolution of his arc that I wouldn't want it to change. So that's why I'm okay with how they handled Leia's character all the way through this movie. Yeah, there's definitely scene points where you could have fixed it, or changed it to kind of make it a little bit easier on JJ going forward for Episode 9 in terms of how to handle the character. But I'm fully on board with them keeping true to what they wrote, what they filmed, and making it happen, and paying the ultimate respect by giving us Carrie's final performance. I think that was a strong way to do it. And if it causes problems down the line, so be it. That's up to JJ to be able to kind of sort that out. That's why Lucasfilm hired him,
right.
So anyway, really that's basically the movie. The Resistance is able to escape. Rey lists some rocks to let the Resistance out of the back of the base. The Resistance at this point is literally whittled down to the point where they can fit on the Millennium Falcon in its entirety. So Resistance is in a pretty fucking bad shape at this point. But as you mentioned, Poe and Rey get a little meeting action. And
hey, I'm Poe.
Poe's working that smolder on her, and she seems receptive. She's looking over at Fen. Fen's taking care of Rose, and Rey's like, "All right, well, I see how it is now."
I'm Rey. I know who you are, girl. I know who you are.
Yeah, I'm not a big shipper, but if they have to go that way, I think that they could have fun with the pairings if they wanted to pull it in those directions. But that's the least of my concerns, certainly. But yeah, so the final sequence of this movie, basically it comes back to these little slave kids over at Canto Bight, and they're telling each other of the story of Luke Skywalker standing up against the First Order and their big fucking ships, and it's showing that Luke has again become this legend that he always had become because of the way that he defeated the Empire in the first place, and now him standing up to the First Order is showing that seeds of hope are spreading throughout the galaxy, that the Resistance is not alone, that there's things to come. And we see Broom Kid.
He's got force powers, man.
He's got some force powers. He takes takes the broom with the Force, and it's showing that the Force it seems like it's coming back into full swing. And a lot of the movie kind of harps on, the Force doesn't belong to the Jedi; it belongs to everyone. So to kind of see this nobody kid, he's probably not a Skywalker kid. Let's put it that way. JJ could pull it in that direction if he wanted to, it's probably really fucking stupid for them to head that way. But the idea is that the Force it's part of everywhere. It's part, it's the space between everyone. It's within everyone. It's just a matter of whether you can really effectively channel that, and it's about the balance in the universe of all of it. And so now the balance is tilting in the favor of allowing, a resurgence of these Force users. And so it kind of sets it up in a very interesting way of, there's Force users in the galaxy. The hope is coming, the hope that the Resistance can fight back against the First Order. It's out there. And so, the heroes are in a kind of dark spot. I mean, we didn't lose any heroes. Aside from Luke, but even Luke,
he'll be back.
He went out on his own terms.
That's it.
So it's not like Han, who tried to redeem Ben and died and paid the price for it. Sure, we won't see Leia again, but in terms of her character within the movie itself, it's not like her, she had a negative ending. So the heroes are in a dark spot in the sense that they've suffered loss and they've suffered failure. But as we learn from Master Yoda, the greatest teacher failure is. And I think we actually talked a lot about the kind of the major character arcs. That's kind of the big theme of this movie is failure and learning from it. And as we kind of talked about everything that happened in the movie, I think we're probably going to touch on some things we already mentioned. So I apologize if some of this comes across as redundant, but I did feel it was kind of important to at least kind of take a closer look, or at least kind of take a step back and really kind of examine kind of what these characters go through in their journey throughout The Last Jedi. So I think kind of the first character that we really see that has any sort of meaningful changes, and probably certainly compared to his arc within The Force Awakens, I'd say this is really the only arc we've seen Poe get to this point. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Not that he wasn't a character in Force Awakens, but he's a legitimate, full-fledged character in this one.
Yeah, well, and it's worth mentioning that, in The Force Awakens, he was, the actual character, they basically were going to kill him off, when they crash back into the Badlands on Jakku. That was supposed to be the end of Poe's character, but Jesus. Then they later decided to bring him back, and obviously, we saw him, being a badass in his X-wing, but in terms of kind of his actual connection to the plot, it was kind of peripheral after that first act. So you could kind of feel that effect, and that's obviously just not the case here. He's heavily involved from basically minute one, really through the end of the movie too.
Correct. Yeah.
And it kind of begins with him just kind of being, a cocky flyboy, just very reckless, and his heart's always in the right place. It's not that he's intentionally, malicious or anything like that. It's just that he often doesn't really consider the consequences of his actions, certainly in terms of how they affect others. Even if he gets some sort of personal benefit derived from it, he doesn't really seem to see the bigger picture.
Yeah, he's blind. He's kind of blinded by pride, and his ability to do things. I can do this. I'm going to do it. And he just kind of takes charge, but it's not always the best course of action, which is similar tropes to the way Luke was treated in Empire Strikes Back, where I have the ability to do this. I need to go do it. I need to take action. So it's there's interesting parallels between each character and reoccurring themes and stuff. And failure is definitely one of those big ones. How do you grow from failure?
Yeah, for every character, we kind of see shades of failure. It kind of takes different forms for each of them. So moving past Poe, we see Finn. Obviously, kind of takes his little side adventure through Canto Bight, and interesting enough, at the beginning of the movie, after everything that he's gone through in The Force Awakens, he's basically looking to abandon ship. I think he's really motivated by he doesn't want Rey to come back to a ship that's been blown to pieces and is presumably still, obviously, basically, she would fall into the hands of the First Order. It's kind of what he's worried about, but it's kind of perceived as like this weakness for him, and basically, by the end of the movie, he's prepped for a suicide run to take out that little cannon, the Death Star miniaturized technological cannon that the First Order has developed. And I'd say that for me, I felt like Finn's arc was a little bit lacking in terms of his development compared to Force Awakens, but I think a lot of that is just because Force Awakens was such a huge development in his character. I mean, obviously it's the first time we see him, but his transition from First Order Stormtrooper to the Finn, it's a pretty big deal, as he likes to call himself. But I kind of felt like in this one, he didn't really, his development, it kind of seemed like maybe took a backseat, I think, maybe to some of the other characters. What do you think?
I think Finn's character, and the more that it's settled with me, the more I've gotten from Finn's arc. And I might be completely in left field, but I think that his arc within this movie is similar to his arc in Force Awakens, in the sense that, listen, these guys are bad. They're going to destroy everything. I need to get out of here. We need to get out of here. We need to leave. So he was going to leave, predominantly to protect Rey. I mean, that's pretty much why he wanted to leave. But when the chips are down and something needs to be done, Finn gets it done. He does it. And in that sense, I almost feel like he's and this is where I think I might be in right field.
Wait, you were in left field before. Where
left
are
field.
you?
Well, I'm all over the place. I'm running around. I see a lot of similarities and parallels to Han Solo's character with Finn, in the sense that Han Solo, it wasn't quick to do anything either. You know what I mean? He was real quick. They listen, why are we doing this? What the hell are you thinking? But when something needed to get done, it got done. And then at the end of the movie, similar to Empire Strikes Back, he was willing to make a sacrifice, for the betterment of, the Resistance, or the betterment of his friends and everything else. You know what I mean? He was willing to give it all. And I sense a parallel there. I don't know if that's accurate or not. At the end of Empire, Han Solo gets carbonite and he gets frozen and sent back to Jabba. But that was supposed to be the end of Han. And then on this one, he's doing the suicide run into the what do they call it? The battering ram blaster or something?
Yeah. I forget the exact term for it.
Battering ram cannon. I think that's what it was called. Either way, he was willing to. Staring death down the throat, and willing to give whatever it needs to be done in order to prevent the forward march of the Empire. So I don't know. I think, like I said, I don't know if that's a direct parallel there or not between those two characters, but it seems like a lot of similarities, anyways, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. I kind of see where you're coming from with that. In terms of kind of how their characters handle things, I guess. And certainly in terms of personality, they're pretty far apart, I'd say. But I can certainly see similar motivations. I think is probably kind of what you're getting at there.
Right. Just as far as the like you said, the way they handle the situation.
Right.
And then how the actual arc develops throughout the movie. Either way, moving forward to other characters.
Yeah, so Rey, obviously she's kind of struggling to, I guess, find her place in the world, and by the end of The Force Awakens, she's obviously kind of taken a step towards doing bigger things and maybe kind of realizing her role in all this, but she's still there ready to pass the baton by the end of the movie, pretty much literally, and she's still trying to do that. She's unable to kind of look at herself as, maybe I'm the one that can make a difference in the galaxy. And so she's looking to Luke, and then she later looks to Kylo when Luke isn't what she wanted or expected. And I think a lot of that, because she maybe doesn't openly realize that she is a quote-unquote nobody until kind of later in the movie. But I think for me, her kind of failure is to kind of reconcile her place in the world, and a lot of that has to do with her how she feels about herself, how others kind of feel about her in terms of her parentage and stuff like that. And obviously that was kind of a big mystery that JJ set up in Force Awakens, and we get some resolution on that front, and I'll touch on that a little bit later as well, because I think that's an interesting topic to kind of take a look at. But really, really fascinating arc for Rey, and I think by the end, when we kind of see her lifting the rocks and kind of saving the day. I mean, you see the whole resistance spill out of the mine at Crate, and, you know, they all just kind of look on in awe. And I think that's kind of her point where, you know, she's at this point, she's rejected Kylo's plea for help, you know, for a union, and you know, she's kind of maybe taking the lessons that Luke has kind of imparted upon her, and I think she's in an even better position now than she was at the beginning of the movie to really kind of, you know, be quote unquote the Last Jedi, right?
Right. I think I think that may have been part of Snoke's downfall. You know what I mean? I think that maybe he sensed the resolution of both characters whenever he was ended. You know what I mean? He you know, he talks about resolve and this, that, and the other. And I think at that moment, I think she's definitely a stronger character coming out of this movie than she was obviously going in. I think she found what she needed to find, and I think moving forward, I think she'll be the hero that everybody needs, which is, I think it's going to be a really, episode 9 is going to be outstanding. I hope it's outstanding anyways. I hope we see, almost like when Luke came back into Return of the Jedi, you know, he has completely owned his role, and I hope that's the case with Rey. I hope she comes back confident. Although, I guess at this point, she's learning from ghosts and books, so I don't know how without a physical teacher there, I don't know how she's gonna really refine her skills, but we'll see what happens, I guess.
Do we really know what Luke was up to between Empire and Jedi? I mean, he didn't have any sort of teacher,
I guess you're right. He didn't really have a teacher, did he?
And he's just coming back dressed up as a badass, got his new lightsaber that he built for himself.
That's true.
Somehow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she does have the ancient Jedi texts. You know, page turners they may not have been, but probably hold a good amount of knowledge for her to at least kind of find her way. So, but she's going to be going up against a pretty big threat, Kylo Ren,
who obviously found resolve and knows his place as well. So it's
right. And that's interesting is that, you know, Kylo was obviously very changed by the end of it. But throughout the movie, you know, his failure is his inability to really kind of end that conflict within him, to really kind of let the past die, as he wants to put it. You know, he's still broken up in some ways about killing his father. He's hesitant to kill Leia, as we kind of talked about a little bit, and as we, you know, see kind of towards the beginning of the movie when the First Order is pursuing the Raddus. And so it's really interesting that Kylo Ben Solo makes this decision to turn against Snoke, and in some ways to try to, you know, really kind of fulfill that resolve and really kind of set his direction. And I think it was a really smart move for that character.
See, I got a question for you.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that Rey's willingness to act provided Ben with the initiative to do what he needed to do?
Yeah, I think they helped each other in that way.
So where there was conflict within Kylo about where he stands and what he should do and this, that, and the other, and an ability to make a decision, with Rey's just, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna face off against Snoke. I'm gonna go do it. And so she leaves and goes does it. I'm gonna go change Ben. I'm gonna go save him. So she goes and marches her ass up, but I guess she really doesn't march her ass up in there, but she tries to infiltrate the base and do all the shit by herself. And do you think Kylo took note of that and said, you know what? Fuck Snoke. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to take control of everything.
I think in some ways, yeah. I think that certainly having Rey kind of present there in the room, I think that's kind of what the catalyst was. You know, their conversations that they, you know, the little force times that they did with each other, I think kind of, you know, they each had kind of different readings on it, but I think that they came to some sort of realization between them two of them that Kylo understands how powerful Rey is, and Rey understands both how powerful Kylo is and how misguided and how conflicted he is. And so I think that they both sense, the possibilities to better, you know, both themselves, each other, and the galaxy as a whole. And, they eventually, you know, as we kind of see in that confrontation, you know, we see for the briefest of moments them coming together for this bigger purpose. And then Kylo just, I mean, each of them just kind of sees it, you know, as it turns out, they see it differently. But I do think that I think that they heavily influence each other, and kind of they both fail in their quest to really, achieve their goals with the help of the other person. So yeah, well, it's interesting that they really tied those characters together so heavily in this one, and I think that sets up for a really emotional possible confrontation in episode 9. I mean, that seems to be the way it's heading with Kylo now positioned as the new Supreme Leader, but yeah, it's interesting. And then, last but not least, of course, Luke Skywalker. And this is obviously kind of where the moral of the story is really kind of delivered, most on the nose, I guess, with Yoda pretty much literally telling him, hey, yeah, you failed, Ben Solo, but that doesn't define you. There's a way to push past that. It's just another lesson for you to really kind of take something out of. And really, that's kind of what motivates Luke to, I don't want to say really sacrifice himself at the end, but, he certainly sees the bigger picture, embrace the legend that he shunned in his exile to Ahch-To. And by embracing that, he's not only in the moment allowed the Resistance a chance to escape and live to fight another day, but he's also reinforced that legend that will potentially spread throughout the galaxy and allow others to fight back and rise up. So yeah, really interesting, I think, character arcs for all of them. I think I've seen a common complaints online that it doesn't really move the plot forward a whole lot, the movie as a whole. And I think that in some ways that is probably fair to say, and I think a lot of that's a consequence of the fact that it does pick up almost immediately after The Force Awakens happens. And so, in a span of maybe a week, it's hard for such seismic changes to, I think, happen within the galaxy. But I think we see a lot of massive, massive changes in the characters that puts them on very different paths than they started on. And that makes for, I think, a very interesting setup with Episode 9.
Well, it changes the whole dynamic of the Resistance versus the First Order, too. I mean, you went from bombing squads and fucking shuttles and a base and everything else. Now you have, 30 people on the Millennium Falcon and no ships or anything. So, I mean, I don't know. I think it propels everything forward in a meaningful way. I don't know.
Well, he said, and it propels every character forward in a very meaningful way, even in terms of the overall plot movement. It's still, the First Order still has a lot of ships, though they lost some. The Resistance has a lot of losses on their side too. In terms of the set pieces, maybe it doesn't jump around point to point as much as Star Wars have done in the past, but I didn't have an issue with that. I'm just mentioning that because I've seen that kind of thrown about online, and kind of moving beyond a lot of the character arcs that we saw. What I found most fascinating about what Rian Johnson chose to do here was how he really just kind of turned everything on its head. He played everything really against expectations, and just in kind of reading interviews that he's done, both before and after the movie, it wasn't like he's trying to intentionally piss Star Wars fans off or anything, but like, this thing you like, I'm going to get rid of it. I think he just, he kind of took it from a natural place, and he found that it served characters in more interesting ways to handle things by doing this. And so the first kind of thing, I kind of briefly touched on it before, Rey's parentage. That was the big, okay, is she a Skywalker? Maybe she's a Kenobi, or, little things like that. And then basically, I'm reading this interview right now that he did, and he basically said that, where he saw it is that, if in this movie someone told Rey that, you are this person's daughter, this is your place in the world, this is what you're meant to do, then that would be the easiest thing that she and the audience as well could hear. He says that it would hand things to her on a silver platter. And the hardest thing for her and for us to hear is that, no, there's nothing there. There's nothing there that's going to define you. This is going to be hard. You have to stand on your own 2 feet and define yourself in the story. And that's really her big arc, but it ties so heavily into kind of what we saw in The Force Awakens, and really, honestly, beyond that, the 2 years of build-up and expectations that have come in. So I think that, I think that's maybe where some of the disappointment and backlash, perhaps if you want to classify it as such, comes into play is because of stuff like that. People build this, fanciful idea of how things are going to play out, and then when things don't go that way, well, it's unexpected, but and for me, it's unexpected, and it feels natural. It feels right. It doesn't feel like an intentional fuck you to anyone. I don't really read it as that, but maybe you could.
It makes the character so much more rewarding.
I agree. I mean, that's how I felt about it. It challenges the characters by putting them through the ringer in some ways to really kind of let them grow naturally, to have a big arc instead of it kind of dispels the myth of the Skywalkers in some ways. It's not just about being space Jesus anymore. It's it's the Force is for everyone. That's kind of the big idea that I think Rian Johnson really wanted to put out there. And so as we saw with Broom Kid, it sets up possibilities for the future in terms of, it doesn't have to be about one thing. It doesn't have to be about one person, and so it changes the mythos in a big way, and it deconstructs it. And, there's other aspects of it too. Luke kind of certainly falling from grace in some ways of, people, probably a lot of people that read the old Legends canon, expect Luke to be this big badass. And, well, 30 years have gone by and he's not that anymore. Things have changed. And I actually saw something earlier that was actually Lucas's original intention, to have Luke kind of have some sort of incident that causes him to force himself into exile and to be this broken version of the character. So, I mean, that's straight from the man's notes. And of course, they really haven't taken too much from what Lucas kind of set out for his ideas for the sequel trilogy, but to see that kind of connection there really is actually pretty interesting, I thought.
No, and I don't know. I think it makes Luke a much more believable character. That he struggles. I mean, that's it. He's a struggling human being. It makes him more relatable. And like I said, it just makes a much more believable character out of him. He is still incredibly badass. I don't think there's anything that happened in this movie that is not badass of Luke. When he said, "Fuck you, I'm throwing that lightsaber over," that's a badass move. It's a crockety old shitty move, okay? But when he just tosses a lightsaber like it's a piece of junk, that's a badass move. It's also badass when you can project an illusion of yourself across the goddamn galaxy. That's pretty badass. He also rips that antenna or whatever the fuck it was off of the building and fights Rey with it, and then catches himself falling with the Force and stuff. It's cool. He's a really cool character. I don't think there's any time in this movie that I didn't think that Luke was cool. I thought he was crockety and he's scarred from the experiences that happened prior to the movie, but I think he's much more human than I think he was in. I think he's much more human in this than he was probably Return of the Jedi. I really enjoyed Luke's character in this movie.
No, I agree with that. And then kind of lastly, in terms of kind of rejecting the mystery that The Force Awakens presented to us, Snoke, Supreme Leader Snoke kind of gets built up in this, hinted at really in Force Awakens as this larger-than-life character. We don't really know anything about him. And so we walk into this movie thinking, okay, it's time for us to really see some full action with Snoke, see what's going on with him, and then, no, okay, he's in pieces, It's interesting that, Rian Johnson makes this decision to, for it certainly services Kylo's character in a big way for him to, step into that leadership role, to resolve his conflict within. But in terms of how it affects Snoke, I mean, did you feel disappointed that you didn't get to know who Snoke was or anything like that? I mean, do you feel like that hampered your enjoyment?
It didn't hamper my enjoyment. I mean, I would have appreciated a Empire Strikes Back length scene involving Snoke where he's just fucking schooling whoever. Now, he did school Rey, he threw her around the room and talked to her and stuff, and, you could see the extent of his Force powers. You find out that he made the link between Rey and Kylo, and you get a sense of it, but it's not as flamboyant as it was in Empire Strikes Back when Luke and Darth Vader and everybody's talking to the Emperor. Unless I'm thinking of Return of the Jedi. Am I thinking of Return of the Jedi?
Yeah, you are.
Oh, fuck. Okay, well, I'm thinking of Return of the Jedi. I would have liked to have that scene of Return of the Jedi in this with Snoke, especially if you planned on ending him. Just because, like I said, I thought Snoke was menacing and I thought he was cool. I would have appreciated to see why he's in the position he is in. I can take more of his history and everything else through other mediums, but like I said, I think a little bit more screen time would have been appreciated for him, for just more screen time in general for that character. But there's resonance with the main theme of the movie of failure through the character of Snoke, because through his hubris, he was unable to see what was happening directly in front of him. And he was unable to see that betrayal, even though he is, quote unquote, so powerful and he's Kylo's teacher and this, that, and the other. He was unable to see that betrayal because of his pride and his hubris. And so in that sense that you get that, it's beating that same drum, I didn't have a problem with it. But I like to see some badass dark force wielding dudes. I think it's cool, and there wasn't a whole lot of that. You got some Kylo, using lightsaber and stuff, but there wasn't a whole lot of dark force wielding things going on, other than Snoke, and Snoke was very short lived in this movie. What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that if you have a scene where Snoke explains how he got to the point, or if someone explains how Snoke got to the point, I don't think it changes the movie in any sort of fundamental way.
No, I wouldn't have. If it was shoehorned in like that, I wouldn't appreciate that. I would have enjoyed seeing Snoke being a little bit more, especially if he's trying to impress Rey or trying to win Rey over. But then he states that he's just going to kill her once he finds out where Luke's at. So I guess there would be no reason to show what he can do, but I would have enjoyed.
I mean, it's just not that story. It's just not the way. I mean, there's no natural way to fit that into this story, and I don't have an issue with this story. It is kind of my point, is that it's not interested in telling Snoke's story. It's interested in telling Kylo's story.
That's
and if
true.
that means that he performs this betrayal against Snoke to become what he wanted to be for so long, then I'm fine with that. I mean, Snoke for me is such a nothing character that it doesn't bother me at all.
No, he is a nothing character. There's nothing there. It's not a whole lot there.
Like that's kind of what I'm saying, is that there's 2 years of this buildup of who's Snoke? Is he Darth Plagueis or whoever? Like, who gives a shit? There's been no indications of that whatsoever. Of he's a powerful dark force user. Okay, that's fine. I mean, yeah, like you said, if they put a comic out about Snoke, I'll read that. I'm interested in the lore, but I think that breaking this down into purely what we see on the screen, Snoke does nothing of real value in The Force Awakens. Here, he gets a couple of scenes to kind of cackle about, and I think that his presence is enjoyable in this movie. It's not that he's a bad character. I just think that there's no real depth given to his character, and so that by losing him halfway through this movie, I think it services a better character. I don't need that Snoke origin. I don't need his motivations exactly. I mean, we see enough, I think, that it works for me, and we see enough that I'm not even slightly upset that he's gone.
My personal opinion is that I think that Kylo's betrayal of his teacher and the person that he obviously has so much respect for would have had more depth and more. It would have been a bigger deal if there was more of that character developed.
I think that's a fault of The Force Awakens, then, is to not give him any proper time to really.
And it could be. I mean,
that character.
Either way, I think that if that character was developed more, I think that betrayal would have more of an effect, because I didn't find myself lingering on the betrayal, but theoretically, I mean, I think that's a huge deal, right? The teacher's becoming the master at that point. He's killing off the past, and that is the pinnacle of killing. I mean, I guess killing your parents is probably the pinnacle of killing off the past, I guess, but changing the status quo in that way and taking control of everything that is Snoke's is such a huge deal. But I didn't find myself lingering on that because, like you said, he's a nothing character. I don't really give a shit about that. Okay, we have Kylo who killed this guy and is taking control of everything. That's it's a big move for Kylo. But I think that there would have been more. There would have been a more emotional response if there was more investment in that other character.
All right, so here's a question for you. I mean, we're a little bit biased in the sense that we basically had 3 movies that came out subsequently about his rise to power, but the Emperor within Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, do we get more characterization for him than we do of Snoke? Honestly? Speaking purely in terms of the original trilogy and the impact that has with Vader, turning the tables against him.
So you see Vader bow to a hologram, much like you do in Force Awakens. And which one was that? Empire Strikes Back?
Right.
And then you get all the Emperor in Return of the Jedi. Am I thinking right?
Yeah.
Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah.
I would say other than... No, I think you're probably right. I think that there was just probably more anticipation with the Emperor throughout that original trilogy than there was with Snoke. Snoke is not nearly as menacing as the Emperor was.
I would agree with that. I think the Emperor certainly has a stronger presence.
And maybe that's my point. Maybe it's not necessarily, there's not a lot of characterization there, but you can, because of that presence there, when Darth Vader's getting zapped to death as he throws him off the thing, you're like, holy shit. You know what I mean? What did he just do? What's he doing? Whereas in this one, the guy's sitting on his chair and he gets cut in half and that's it.
But at the same time, it is a holy shit moment, but it's a holy shit moment because of Vader's motivations in that scene. In the same way, I think that this one is a holy shit moment because of Kylo's motivations in that scene. I think that's what makes it interesting
Everything else. And
I agree with you in the principle that Snoke could have been a more interesting character and it could have had a greater effect, but that wasn't the story that we got. So I'm not upset by the fact that
it's not a story about
Snoke. This is the result of what we got. Again, I'll read a comic book or a book or something that they put out because I'm interested enough in the lore, and maybe that'll add to my reading of this scene or anything like that. But speaking purely in terms of what we did get, I had no issues with it. So anyway, we've kind of dwelled on that. I'm probably for far too long. Yeah. A lot of returning faces for this one, but we did get a couple new faces added to the Star Wars universe. How did you feel about some of the newcomers we got in here? I guess Rose probably being the one that has the most screen time dedicated.
Yeah, no, Rose was great. I liked Rose. I think probably my favorite new character would probably be, I thought Holdo was awesome. I think she's probably my favorite. At the same time, I think DJ was pretty good too. I think he owned that character. He was he held a presence when he was on camera.
A presence?
Yeah, he's quotable. He's pretty funny, and I don't know. I thought he was pretty cool. But I think Holdo is probably the shining star as far as new characters go. Her sacrifice at with the kamikaze attack, and when you find out the kind of character that she is, it's a powerful moment, and you find out that she's not just, Poe has this misconception of her that she doesn't know what she's doing, she's naive, or she's not taking action, or she's a coward, or what have you. Come to find out that she's so much more than what he thought, and I think that's a learning lesson for Poe as well, and I think her character serves a very significant role with everybody else's story. I thought she had a very powerful role, and the actress nailed it.
I agree with that. I thought Vice Admiral Holdo was probably my favorite of the newcomers. I liked her characterization kind of from the get-go, even when she was kind of in conflict with Poe. She had a really good presence. I mean, it's Space Laura Dern. What more can you ask for?
Right.
So I really liked her character, and obviously, as you mentioned, her sacrifice with that lightspeed maneuver. I mean, what a moment. I enjoyed DJ as well. I thought Benicio was a really fun presence. Hopefully we see more of him. I'd like to see a little bit more DJ. Honestly, I think that he seems like a fun character. I guess he's kind of the Lando-esque type character, if you wanted to draw the Empire parallel there, but I don't think he's going to be piloting any Resistance ships or Millennium Falcons or anything anytime in the future, but I could see him kind of being a fun character to bring back, and maybe a Maz type cameo type role as they did. Well,
there's a reoccurring character through Rebels and Clone Wars. His name's Hondo, and he provides comedic relief, and he's a low life character. In some situations, he leaves the good guys in bad situations, but they're never situations that they can't get out of. Now, I think the situation that that Benicio left, Finn and Rose in was pretty fucking dire. And I don't think that Hondo ever did anything quite to that extent. But in the sense that Hondo is a reoccurring character that Rebels and the good guys consistently have to rely on. It makes things interesting, and I like you said, I would enjoy seeing that role with Benicio. I think that would be an interesting move, especially in live action movies. I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, I mean that's really it on the new character front. I'll give a special shout out to A-wing pilot Tali Lentra because she was awesome, but she is no longer with us.
By awesome, do you mean
very
cool?
Sad. She's really cool.
Yeah, she's pretty cool, man.
She's pretty cool. Anyway, all right. If you had to single out one moment in the film that you would identify as your favorite, what would it be?
Damn, favorite moment of the entire...
Only one. You can only pick one.
God damn.
I'll tell you mine if that makes it easier.
Well, yeah, you go ahead and start while I think. All
right. I mean, mine's probably the most obvious one. The team up between Kylo and Rey fighting the Praetorian Guards.
That's fucking cool.
It's emotionally charged for me, and the actual sequence itself is just fucking fantastic. The choreography for all the combat and the utilization of the different weapons by the guards, and really, I said the framing of the shots, just the way the uses of the deep reds and stuff. I mean, it's just there's plenty of moments that I think are worthy of being mentioned, but for me, that's the one that was everything. That was it. That was it for me. So, got anything on your end?
Nah, man, this is hard. I'm just gonna say the kamikaze attack.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, that's a good one too.
And that of course that the event of the kamikaze attack is stellar. The sound design was good. It was emotionally charged. I think it provided important lessons for characters. But there's a lot of really good scenes, though. What you could say just the whole crate sequence, the whole crate, the standoff. That was a great scene, or great. The whole sequence there was awesome. Also the opening sequence with Poe was fucking cool. And then the throne room was cool too. So there's I don't know, it's very hard, but I'm gonna say the kamikaze attack just because it's art. I think it's artistically done. I think it's I don't know. I thought it was really good. The music leading up to it, the silence. I remember when I saw that, my jaw dropped. I was like, "Fuck!" I actually think I made audible noises, and I think you may have laughed when we watched it in IMAX.
It's possible.
I think I got a little giggly when that happened. Either way, that's probably my favorite. I think maybe.
Yeah. I'll cheat a little bit here. It's not a moment in the movie itself, but in the credits there when they have "In Memory of Our Princess Carrie Fisher," that got me choked up a little bit too. So
yeah,
I thought that was a really nice touch for them to put in there, and they have like a little cue, a musical cue.
The whole music changes.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, that's really it as far as Episode 8, as far as The Last Jedi is concerned. Let's kind of briefly touch on Episode 9. We know that J.J. Abrams is coming back to co-write it along with Chris Terrio, and he'll be directing it as well. I mean, this movie puts J.J. in a pretty tough spot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Certainly not an enviable position anyway.
Who knows what he could do? He could say, "Hey, listen, Rey, that was Kylo Ren being an asshole. Your parents are really this." And you could say that fucking Snoke's got a clone, and he's back to fuck up Kylo Ren and Rey. You could do. I mean,
he could say the whole thing was a dream.
Yeah,
he could.
Fever dream. Yeah, in Luke's mind, and Luke never died. He's still alive.
Yep. Everything's fine.
He dreamt the whole thing. No, but it's definitely gonna be interesting where you can take the characters from here. I don't think you'd be able to do the direct handoff like they did in this.
No, certainly not. I think probably the most obvious solution is to go back to the tried and true Star Wars formula and have some sort of a time jump between films, and I would say probably a good sized time jump would probably be how I would handle it anyway. I don't know if it's necessarily the best way to handle it. I don't want to make that statement. I'll start to sound like all the Star Wars fans on the internet that are bitching right now. I think that the time jump allows these characters to kind of move into different spots. It allows the Resistance to kind of amass possibly some forces. It allows the First Order to collect themselves, Kylo to maybe continue along his path that he's set down, and it would also probably allow for the possibility of what do you do with Leia's character at this point. And it's a hard question. I wish that they didn't have to figure out some way to have her character exit, because this movie really, I think, put Leia through some interesting situations and set her up in a very fascinating place. And it's pretty clear that she was being set up for a big role in 9, and now we're at a point where, okay, well, we can't do that. So, I'm curious to see really what JJ comes up with, because that would kind of be where I would start was with the time jump. But I mean, does JJ maybe bring back some of the elements that he played with in Force Awakens that Rian Johnson really didn't play with? The Knights of Ren, MIA for the entire movie. Who are they? What have they been up to? We didn't see Snap Wexley in this movie. Did he die in that early sequence? Jess Pava, she wasn't here. So, some of the bit characters that survived the events of Force Awakens, can we just assume that they're dead because they're not there throughout most of the movie? Or, what's going on with that? I mean, most of them are minor characters, obviously. So, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. There's things they can do with it. And, I think The Last Jedi sets up an interesting situation, certainly in terms of the Force kind of being a heavy player. Are we going to see a new Jedi Order? I mean, would they go that far? I don't know. I mean, I said it's not a position I'd want to be in. Let's put it that way. But I'm still very, very intrigued by what direction they choose to take with it. So it'll be interesting.
A lot of places to go, man. A lot of places to go.
And we'll find out. I guess we got a couple of years to wait now. December 2019. So got 2 years. In the meantime,
when's Ryan supposed to get his own shit? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I mean, it sounds like he hasn't written anything, so he doesn't even know where he's going to take it. It was literally just a, hey, do you want to do this? All right. So I don't think we'll see anything in Rian Johnson's trilogy until I'd say 2020 at the earliest, and even that might be pushing it.
Right.
But I mean, we've got Solo coming up in May. And then there's a 1.5 year gap between that and Episode 9, and that's all we know about really to this point, other than Rian Johnson's trilogy. We don't have a firm date for that. The Obi-Wan movie has been rumored for a while, so that would probably be 2020 at the earliest if that happens. And I mean, it's such a marketing machine that Star Wars is it's kind of the Marvel thing where you put one out a year and it makes you your billions of dollars, and then you do it again the following year, add a couple more billion to the stack, and keep the train rolling.
I wish I had a property worth $1 billion every year. That'd be pretty ballin', wouldn't it?
That would be nice, especially when you bought it for I think $4 billion. Yeah, it's probably a good investment. Good on you, Disney. You've done good. Okay. I think that's really it. For those of you who have stuck with us to this point,
God damn, you're crazy.
It's a lot of Star Wars. Let's just put it that way. A lot of Star Wars. I think I mentioned last episode that both of us were pretty excited to talk about it, and now you understand what we meant by that.
Yeah.
But I guess it's time to finally say goodbye. Again, for those of you that managed to stick around for this,
you must like Star Wars too.
Yeah, I'd say so. So thank you for sticking around and listening to us talk endlessly. It seems like about Star Wars. I mean, we had a lot of fun getting into it. Don't get me wrong, but boy, we lost track of time. Our intro and outro track is Mechanolith by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Our website is watchreviewrepeat.com. You're going to find everything you need there. Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, anything like that. So, Star Wars, I mean, this is the biggest movie of the year. If you guys have any, questions about it, any thoughts on it or anything like that you want to kind of share with us, we'd love to hear that and interact with anyone that listens to us. So you can get in touch with us on any of our social medias, or through the email, watchreviewrepeat@gmail.com. And I think that's a good place to leave it for this week. Next week, we're finally going to be touching on something that I know you have been wanting to cover for quite some time, but the release schedule has been not so accommodating as far as letting us see it. So
yeah.
Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water finally getting his full nationwide expansion, and so that will be the subject of discussion next week.
We actually might. You want to go see this weekend?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sounds good, dude.
Perfect.
You guys have a wonderful night.
Yes, indeed. We'll see you next week, guys. Take it easy.
Adios. Star Wars. Do, 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 do.